All right, we are back with another episode of the Workweek After Hours. Steve, welcome back.
Great to be back, Shane, and looking forward to another episode here, man.
Yeah, it feels good now. I'm back in my my humble abode here, and in the flow of things, in the natural flow of things. So,
In the same
um,
time zone for more than a
y-
week. Yeah.
yes, 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 yeah. And you and I are closer on time zone, so I'm not having to stretch my hours. So, for those of you that are watching, you'll see me holding up a book here, um, Work Week, and this is Steve's literary debut of a book, and we've dropped some seeds to it, I think, in different episodes, but this one we want to dedicate an episode to it, and that's because the book launch is coming up on August 3rd of 2021. So if you hear this before then, it'll give you some time. We would strongly, I would for sure, strongly recommend go to Amazon, check out a copy of it. If anybody has a team of leaders, before we dive into this, if anybody has a team of leaders or just your team of contributors or staff or colleagues where you might want to do a bulk buy purchase, feel free to reach out to Steve or I, either one at LinkedIn or any of the other socials, and we'll be happy to connect you directly with the publisher and they can work that out. So, Steve, if you want to give us a little bit of backstory. So, Workquake, embracing the aftershocks of COVID-19 to create a better model of work. How did this book even come about?
Well, I tell you what, I have been, as you know, teaching, speaking, getting out there in the world probably the last 8 to 10 years. And I lost count of how many times people said, "So where's your book? Where's your book?" And I kept pointing to my head. And and also probably the last 3 to 4 years, I started to really get more clear in my own mind around, something that I wanted to, put my flag in the ground around, and that's relative to the future work. So just kind of, the idea had been brewing for almost a decade,
Mm-hmm.
and that the more I started to see a lot of trends and transitions in the future work and a lot of things that were frustrating me, around lack of creativity, lack of innovation, especially from organizations around how to build compelling talent solutions. It just started to bubble up. And I said, you know what? I think now's the time. I'd flirted with starting to write a book 10 years ago. And any of my college friends who would be listening would know that I am the master of procrastination. So I was really good at coming up with reasons why, I couldn't do it. I have probably outlined two other books at different points in my life, one around acquisitions, which I was a big part of my life for about 6 years. So that's another book that I might get to at some point in the future. But I finally said, you know what, I'm ready to do it. And so I put my head down and said, let's go. And it just started slowly, and it just started to build from there. So probably took me a year to write it, you know. And I connected with a friend of mine, Tom Lee, and Tom, he and I had gotten to know each other probably 6 years ago. He was a business editor with the local paper here, San Francisco Chronicle,
Mm-hmm.
and he and I sort of been in touch, and then he got busy with other stuff, and I got busy with other stuff, and then about a year and a half ago, I said, "Hey, what are you up to? I think I'm serious now. Let's do this." And he's like, "Yeah, perfect timing. I just stopped working at the Chronicle, and I want to start helping." So he was a big help for me in getting started, and you learn something when you start writing a book, or at least I learned this about myself, is that all of us are better at different things. And what I learned about myself in the creative process for writing a book was I'm good at outlining, and then I'm good at editing, but I'm not great at taking the outline and bringing that to life. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where my friend Tom really helped me, sort of like, okay, here's the outline. I'm going to start this, and then you run with it. And so once I got, he and I worked a pretty good rhythm. That's how I kind of got started. So he's super helpful. And from there, the book iterated over time. Like, we moved to the left, moved to the right, different things were happening. And we got access to some really amazing people. And that's sort of my approach in writing the book, one of the first things you have to ask yourself is like, so what style do you want to take in this thing? You're going to take like an intellectual style, you're going to take an academic style, you're going to take a research base. And my approach was like all sort of true to me, sort of story based from my life and from the hundreds of leaders and coaching sessions I've had with people, both as professionals and as talent leaders and organizations.
Absolutely. And some amazing stories in here, by the way. My wife has even started to read this book. So
awesome.
So something that I know you're very passionate about and you have a really strong stance on is, for probably, I don't know, 10 years now, we've been hearing that artificial intelligence, that robots, that machines are going to take over the workforce, right? They're going to put people out of work. Nobody's going to have a job, none of those things. I think it's ironic for anybody listening to this in real time in 2021 here, that there's more humans probably needed than ever. But you wouldn't have known that, right? You wouldn't have seen this. So this is something that speaks in a lot of ways to your vision and your ability to see patterns, right? See patterns in the workplace, see patterns in the future of work. What about why? Does it come from your experience or is it a blended view of like, oh, I see this coming, but also my experience of, working with people and them saying, oh, we need, this is going to be the case. Where did this vision kind of come from?
Yeah, it's hard for me to pin down an exact point, but I do feel that over a course of a few years, I was getting frustrated, and it finally was able to become clear to me that what we were seeing in talking about the future of work from a number of sources in the media and in the academia and in the business world was that we were creating what I've called like the worst marketing campaign in history around the future work. We were just scaring people, and that was highly demotivating, highly stress-inducing, and really frustrating for me. So that was a big impetus for me to sort of shape a approach and a perspective that was much more motivational. And the deeper I got into this, Shane, the more I'm like, I'm more convinced than ever that the future of work is about being more human, not about robots, technology, and automation. Now, are those dimensions of technology an important part of the future of work? Yes, they are. But what I felt we were missing in that conversation was we were getting overly seduced by talking about the technology and what's going to happen and how we are victims as humans, rather than, wait a second, we've created that technology. Let's build it and apply it in a way that makes our humanity and our experience with work richer, more rewarding, and more fulfilling. And so the more I talked to people, the more I uncovered stories about how people were realizing that in their own lives, and how organizations were realizing greater outcomes, much to their surprise, by creating a greater human experience in the world of work. So that was a huge part of it. I mean, this was so frustrating for me. Robots are going to take away jobs. Half the jobs in 10 years don't even exist today. Most people, in the past had 1 to 3 jobs, and in the future are going to have 30 jobs, and one person's like in 10 jobs at the same time. And that may be true, but we were not presenting that in a way that felt achievable, comfortable, to so many people. And this is the story of the evolution. I mean, the future throughout the beginning of time. And we've been, talking about it in ways sometimes that really is making people afraid. And so I try to take an approach here that says there's a way to embrace this, and I believe frame it, build it, architect it, that is far more satisfying and achievable.
Yep.
And not to be worried. And for all generations, in all industries and in all verticals, that I think we can have a conversation. And, probably the big linchpin, and stop me, Shane, if we've talked about this before on the podcast, but, what is every single organization facing today in whatever industry business they're in? And that is digital transformation, right? And so part of my point that I like to make with people when I talk about this is, listen, let's just take the words digital transformation. And as a human being, as a worker, when your company says we're going through a digital transformation, what do you hear? And what I think most workers hear is, my job's going away, technology is going to take over, because it's a digital trend. They're not saying, hey, we're bringing in technology so that you can have a better, richer world of work. No, we're saying digital transformation is coming. And by the way, when you hear those words, digital transformation, what images come to your mind, right? Is it beautiful? Is it lovely? Is it gorgeous?
Sure.
No, it is cold and heartless. And so I really feel like we need a different language. And so this book is just, I don't know that I have all the answers, honestly, but this book's an attempt to try to start a better conversation and to invite more companies, organizations, and people to share their stories. You know, and you're a great example of this, Shane. Like, I didn't meet you until my book was already, you know, at the editor's office. And when you told me your story, I'm like, man, I wish I'd met you a few months ago. You would your story definitely be in my book.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And it sounds so Workquake, the title really is a premise of this major event happened in the world of work. Now is no better time to build what we actually all deserve and what's actually coming, to get ahead of it in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't be more fortunate. You said it a few minutes ago. I feel the validation for what I've been doing has been realized by what's happened. The pandemic has realized and revealed to us, wow, now is a great time to rebuild something better. Like, absolutely. And I'd finished most of my book before the pandemic hit. And then the pandemic hit. I'm like, holy cow, I'm going to have to. My first fear was like, oh my gosh, maybe my book doesn't mean anything because the world is going to be so radically different. And then probably a couple nights later, I woke up and told my wife, I said, Jenny, I think my book's even more important now. Like, we got to finish this, but I need to put some more ties into how the pandemic is shaping and try to take, you know, a view of how things are going to accelerate even faster. And so you're right. I mean, there's no greater time in our worlds than today for us to rebuild a better future work, because everything for everyone has changed. And that should be something where we should be playing offense and being really excited about. And so I think I couldn't have predicted a better time for my book to be coming out, honestly.
I think I call it, you know, catching lightning in a bottle, right? Like you, man, it's there. Something that I find really interesting in this is this is not just for the C-suite person that is, in a high-rise building looking to build a team. There's actually really, really helpful information in here for, a new person going into the workforce, young people that are trying to navigate the world of university and graduation. And then what do I do? There's some really, really helpful information in here that you believe is also ways that I think the word we use is individual contributor, as an individual contributor to a place of work, can help create a better work environment as well. It's not, I think a lot of times leadership and management gets demonized in some way, and sometimes rightfully so, but also it's our responsibility, if we're coming to work every day and, doing our individual contribution, that like there's some things we can do as well. And one of the things that you hit on in there is this curiosity, this desire to learn, this desire to want to learn more. And I think now in today's world where there are so many job openings, it's almost like a plethora of opportunity. If you work somewhere where, if you've wanted to advance, there's never been a better time in the world for you to work somewhere and to advance in the place. So I do find that really interesting, that it is very, very informative and also helpful for really anyone in the workplace or looking to get into the workforce, that there's some information there that's helpful.
Yeah. And, Shane, we haven't talked about this before, so this is interesting. I purposefully did not want to talk to any famous people in this book. I'm not a famous person yet. Maybe I will be. I purposely wanted this to be a story that wherever you are in your journey, you're in school, you're not in school, you don't know whether you should go to school, but work's going to have to factor into your life in terms of you making sense and providing a better future for yourself and for your family. I wanted that voice to be of dozens of people that you never heard of before around the world, discovering new ways of building value for themselves, for their teams, for their organizations. That was really, really important to me. And that's what I hope to invite in my Workquake 2.0 is more people that you've never heard of telling these stories. And I'm the first person that would love to go hear Mark Andreessen or Elon Musk give a talk, but I'm not Mark Andreessen, I'm not Elon Musk, but there's so many people building incredibly compelling pathways for themselves that are, finding their whatever their goal, realizing their goal, whether it's to help first time college entrants and their family like finish college, whether it's someone who wants the financial independence, whatever that is. That's the kind of angle I took here. I didn't talk about that in the introduction. I did, but that was definitely fueling, like, what's the story? How do I want to tell this story? And who's my audience? And thank you for sort of recognizing that the appeal and the relevance of this could be for, like, if you're in a house, like, could be for someone who's in school, someone who's in the workplace, someone who's in a senior level role. I think there's a lot of relevance, and that's the unique perspective that I feel that I bring here, where having been an employee, and not losing sight of what that's like, having been in management, having been an executive, and having been sort of a quasi-independent business owner on my own the last 10 years, like, I feel like I've got pretty good peripheral vision, worked in 6-7 different industries, lived in 4 different countries in my life. Like, I think I've got a perspective here that's relatable, and I
Totally
truly
agree.
hope I truly hope that I achieve that, in the audience that reads this book. Like, yeah, I don't know Steve, but I kind of get the way he's talking about this. It makes sense to me, and I
Yeah,
hope that helps.
absolutely. And I think I've told you this. My father-in-law, who's made a career and a history of traveling around and consulting for CPA firms and continuing technology for those CPA firms and banks and those different things. When he read the book, and this actually really speaks to who the book can be open to. So I have a sister-in-law who's the CEO of a hospital. He sent her a copy. He sent a copy to my brother-in-law, who has his own business, but also does some consulting for another. He sent it to my wife's cousin, who is an individual contributor, at a firm directly. He sent it to another gentleman who speaks, and he's an entrepreneur. So all different people, all different walks of life, all different ages, all of that, because it resonated with him as something like, hey, this is, this can help, this can speak to that person. So you even mention in there as because I think being a curious employee, curious individual contributor, starts to bleed into entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship within a company, right? So if I'm an entrepreneur, that's the basis of what you can't become an entrepreneur if you're not curious about something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to solve this problem. It even bleeds over into even to some of that of if you're an entrepreneur, and I think rightfully so. We've had, I think, more LLCs created in the last 18 months than in the last 3 years combined, or something like that. So with this huge rush to solve problems, those people are going to become leaders. Those people are going to start building cultures. Those people are going to start having staff members in an office. This is the playbook, right? In a lot of ways. And I'm not saying that to hype you up. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to be as honest as I see. And I think it's a way to get the right mindset. If you want to be, look, I think you'll agree with this, Steve. You don't have to be an empathetic leader. There are many leaders out here who aren't the greatest of people, that have no emotional intelligence whatsoever, that just kind of their heads down, narrow focused. It's product, it's the bottom line, it's the P&L, and that's it. And those people, financially still succeed. But if you want to be a more human centered person in the workforce, it's it. It's absolutely it. It's absolutely it. I'm curious, what was something that you what was something that you learned about yourself after going through this process of that you didn't know about yourself, that you just didn't know? You're like, oh man, holy cow, I did not know that about myself.
Um, I didn't appreciate how broad my how broad the arena was where I had a point of view around. I didn't
Yep.
like we're getting in this like, wow, I got something to think about, something to add on a whole, on a much deeper level than I thought. I honestly thought like, do I really have a book here? And then it came down to, wow, I need to whittle this thing down. I need to try to get focused. So I surprised myself on that in a really in a real positive way. I was like, wow, there's a lot here. I will say that I didn't like my book until I was almost done with it. I was like, it moved from a chore to like I'll never forget the day my wife and I escaped to Mexico. We have a home in San Diego, and we went down to Mexico. A friend has an apartment down there. He gave us the keys to it for about a week, and I brought my computer, and I was like, I need to finish this. Like I've been so close to finishing it. I just need to get away. So we got away, and I remember just hours and hours. I was probably cranking that 7-8 hours a day for a week, and I hadn't done that from the beginning of my project.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a few days on, a week or two off, few days on. And so I'm like, I'm just powering through. And finally I looked at her, I said, babe, I think I really like my book now. I really like this book. And that, I was surprised. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, the authors really like what they're doing. So I didn't. I was like, it was grind. It was tough, and it wasn't flowing naturally for me. It was a hard process. And at some point I was like, wow, I like how this thing goes. And I feel really fortunate to have hit that point. To do it, because sometimes you start these journeys and you don't know, like I didn't know how it was going to go. And it was like starting a lawnmower for me. Like I'd started this 10 years before and I couldn't get it going. And so that was probably like, sort of like, wow, the breadth of things that I had perspective around. I underappreciated that. And I think we all do that in our lives. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit sometimes to sort of say, hey, you got a point of view that, on more things than you may appreciate.
Absolutely. So one of the things a quote that you have here in the book, it just happens to be where you're also talking about Duke and Coach K and basketball and those things. And you mention that, and I think this is kind of going around the mindset of, as an employer, as a business owner, as a leader, it's a mindset to have when you're bringing people into your culture, because I think you've done the research. What's the average time right now people are spending at a job?
Well, in the U.S. is barely 4 years, and for people 25 to 35 is about 2.8.
Okay, so 25 to 35 is 2.8. That's a large section of the workforce.
Right.
Also, a section of the workforce that is no longer enticed by things like pensions and these different things that the older workforce was motivated by, or just built into the system that they entered. So the quote in here you have is, "Come here and I will help you leave after 1 year, because I will make you better than anyone else in just 1 year." And that makes me think about the saying that we've got. I know we have it here in the South. I'm sure it's across America in most places. When you play sports, when you go into someone else's gym or someone else's field, hey, coach always said, hey, don't leave any trash. Let's leave it better than you found it, right? And that mentality, you're saying, take that mentality into a leadership role, into bringing your culture, into bringing new people in, that it's okay to speak about, hey, I know you don't want to be here for very long, and that's okay. Let us pour into you to make you the best possible human being that you possibly can. And then if you leave, you leave. If not, then we've got a great human being here working with. Is that kind of the mindset that you put there?
Yeah, what I was trying to do in that part of the book is help organizations see that there are other organizations in the world that have made the pivot from stay here a long time to, hey, we know you're not going to stay here a long time, but let's make the best of it and try to find examples like the Division I college basketball, where people have made, I got to build a world-class team every year. Every year I got to start with a new group of people, and I know my best talent's going to go, and I'm going into my architecting my talent strategy to prepare for that. And most organizations today are built around long-term engagement, long-term tenure, and every single benefit. So that was where I was trying to go there, is say, listen, no executive that I talk to around the world believes talent is going to stay longer than they have. And college basketball is just a super great example. Now there's rules that change that frame that, and the rules we've talked a little bit about in earlier episodes have changed even more just in the last year to facilitate people having more independence of choice in where they go to school and how long they stay. And so what I'm trying to help organizations understand is there are ways that you can build value in your organization that doesn't necessarily require someone having to stay a long time. There's other success stories. So take a look at those, because nobody thinks people are going to stay longer. So if every one of your strategies, your talent, benefits, perks, rewards is driven by how long someone stays, you're missing an opportunity, and that opportunity is maybe, and this is one of the things that I talk in the book about, but that Coach K has done really well, and many other Division I successful basketball programs have done, is said, listen, your goal is to make it in the NBA. We know that's your goal, but we also have to be honest. Most people are not going to make it. But if you come here, you come to Duke, Louisville, Kentucky, if you don't make it, because you came here, you're going to have a better chance of becoming a scout, an assistant coach, a broadcaster, all the other ocean of opportunities that's there, because our alumni has got good opportunities for you. So we're not just caring, and this is the key, we're not just caring about you for when you're here, we're caring about you for the entirety of your journey, right? Absolutely. And that's counterintuitive, right? We're like, hey, the longer you stay here, the more I care about you and the more I'm going to get your back. And now we got to flip that and say, we know you're not going to stay here, but I care about you more for your whole journey than just when you're here, right?
So really what you're saying is, as places of employment, as leaders, as business owners, there needs to be a reset on the self-awareness of really what you have, right? If you're a fast food chain, you're going to have some turnover, probably higher turnover than, the local factory or, the local law office, right? So if we know that, then really what you're saying is one of the most innovative strategies in 2021 that you can come up with is, don't almost put the focus on, let's see if we can build the best alumni network of people who used to work here and leverage that and the quality of people, than just, hey, we just want to keep you here for as long as we can because that's just easier on us. Right.
And by the way, no one has ever proven long tenure creates greater value. I could take 15 of the most valuable companies in the world and show you they have some of the shortest tenure in the world. So, let's go. If you want to debate that, let's have that debate. But here's how I would phrase it, Shane, and that is, I think employers are going to have to increasingly move from feeling like they are a destination and moving to appreciating that they are a transition point for someone, that they are there for a journey, part of that person's journey, but not the whole journey. But they can still be part of their journey, just not as the employer per se. You follow me?
Absolutely.
We're going to help you. We're going to give you mentors for the rest of your year. We're going to, be in touch with you. Maybe you're going to send us deals. Maybe you're going to refer new employees to us. Maybe you're going to help evaluate new product ideas we have. We want you in the fabric of our future. It's just going to be different. And especially, every enlightened CEO I talk to, they agree with me on the first point, and they're not ready to take the second point. The first point is, do you think your employees are going to stay longer with you in the future? No. Okay. Are you ready to build a strategy around that? No.
Yeah.
And I'm the first person that says, I want to keep my best A players, my superstars as long as possible. And I'm not suggesting we should let that go. I'm just suggesting, I think it's a failed strategy to believe everyone's you should try to keep everyone for a super long period of time. That's just not going to work.
Yeah. You want to re-sign Michael Jordan, but you also wanted to create a great environment to where the more B and A minus players want to come play with Michael Jordan, right? You want to create that. And to be able to do that, you have to build a reputation. I think you and I talked about, maybe even on the last episode, about NFL players and, players coming into training camp and those that get cut that don't make the roster. There's some teams that those players never hit the waiver wire. They're just scooped up by everybody else because this coach or that coach who has this high reputation of bringing quality people in, they want those people, because if they found value in them, then surely we can find value in them too.
Yeah, and that gets to another point that feels contradictory to a lot of organizations, which is, and I was that person earlier in my career, which is, why would I pay for your degree? Because if I do that, I know you're going to leave. And now it's like, well, they're going to leave anyway. And don't you feel like you're going to look better and have a better brand if you are the place where they grew the most? And that is, when I left LinkedIn, I left this aspirational goal with the CEO, Jeff Weiner. And I said, Jeff, I hope the legacy that you leave here is that your alumni are the most successful technology executives that anyone's ever seen, that your people go on to found new organizations, to lead great and do great things. And that's your legacy. And that's not what a lot of people get measured on. It's like, how did you do with the team that was right there? And I think it's a faulty assessment of leadership, that I think the great leaders of the future should be measured by how great did people do after they left working for you, doing something else. Did it carry? And I think there's a lot to be said for that. You brought up someone in our last episode about that. I would say in football, Bill Walsh is one of those people. We talked about the coach of the Patriots. I mean, it's hard to argue he hasn't been incredibly successful, but if you look at the tree of everyone who was an assistant coach under Bill Walsh, like that's a huge portion of the head coaching, alumni network that's been out there. They learned from him.
No doubt. Something I want to point out too, and this is why I appreciate so much of my time getting to work with you and getting to see, is your ability to have some humility and realize this book isn't coming from an arrogant place of I've never made any mistakes. In like you just pointed out, a lot of this is pointed out from the mistakes that you did make along your journey and along your climb through this career path that you've been through. And I think that's really important, because there's way more value in a mistake than there is a success, because in order to overcome that mistake and to get past it, you have to learn, you have to understand why, you have to understand those different pieces, and for you to be able to tap into that and to be that transparent and say, yep, you know what, I know exactly how you're feeling, because I was that guy. I was that person. That was me.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah, and I think, and we've talked about this earlier, I think humility and being humble builds more loyalty and followership today. Because, and I've said this to a couple of organizations I was going through some pretty deep dive, tough conversations with in the last few weeks. I'm like, if you think you can get in front of your employees, the biggest mistake you can make today is tell them I got it all down. I'm fully in control. Like you lost the locker room when you do that today.
No doubt.
It's like, okay, we are in really an economy of experimentation right now. And it was pretty interesting. I was with this one, an arm of a huge multinational last week, and it was the team that was working in the pharmaceutical division. And we were talking around, they asked me the question everyone asked me today, which is, hey, should we go hybrid? Should we be fully remote? Should we get back to work? What do you think we should do? And they're asking me this question, and I don't know anything about their business other than I've been working with them for a couple hours. And I said, well, listen, let me ask you a question. You are in the pharmaceutical department, right? Okay, so how do your scientists, your laboratory PhDs, like how are they building new products? Oh, they're experimenting. Okay, well, that's what we got to be doing with the work right now. We got to experiment and try stuff. And a lot of stuff's not going to work, but that's making us smarter to find what is going to work, right? And that I think is, I made big mistakes in my career thinking that, if I made a mistake, it's going to make me look weak. It's not going to make me look strong. It's going to make me less successful in my career arc. And what I found was, owning up to it and saying, yeah, that was my bad. I learned, I'm sorry, I won't do that again. Or, hey, I think we learned a really valuable insight. That actually served me really, really well. People feel like, okay, I trust this guy more. And as we've talked about, I mean, that is, and I've heard this, I heard a great quote the other day from this guy, Dov Seidman, which says, there's only one legal performance enhancing drug that's out there today, and it's trust. And I was like, man, I love that. And that is so true. We are in the trust, people call it the trust economy. And in a high velocity, fast paced, crazy world right now, trust's under attack.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big part of the conversations I'm having through, the opportunity to talk to many organizations today, which is, yeah, technology is really important. Yes, being on the cutting edge is really important, but let's not lose sight of what you're trying to do. You will not realize the success if you don't have the trust from your employees, that you're applying the technology thoughtfully, that you have really smart plans in their best interest, as well as customers and shareholders, right?
Well, so I think kind of peeling the curtain back and giving them kind of a look into you and I's working world. It's funny you mentioned the trust thing and the performance enhancing. The last 2 or 3 days in our work world has been really positive, right? There's been a lot coming on, and your trust in me allows me to have the energy to go and make these things happen. And if there wasn't that trust and there was this constant whatever the behavior energy of distrust there, it would slow things down. There we'd have to be meeting like
Right.
and I almost expected you today when we had a call earlier and I ran a bunch of stuff. I was like, hey, this and this, and then you didn't come back and you were like, okay, well, I need a little bit more information or tell me about that. But your trust in me to know that I have your best interest at hand and we're going to go through is it is very, very, I don't want to say freeing, but is assuring to know that I'm doing the right, like I'm doing what I ultimately want to do from a professional standpoint, and that is help other people succeed and grow and reach the pinnacle of wherever their ability and their talent and their story will allow them to go. And so I want to echo that. I totally agree with that. And just sharing a real world experience from that.
Yeah,
So
appreciate that. And that's one of the segments of the book that is very, very meaningful to me in shaping my career. Was this woman I talk about, Mimi Jagu, and Mimi, bless her heart, passed away a few years ago. She was probably the one leader who hired me that had the most impression on me around bestowing trust on people, and even people that have better skills than you, that under a more traditional model maybe you'd feel intimidated by, maybe you feel like, well, I don't want to hire that person, they're kind of better than me. And Mimi were really someone that really shaped me to get comfortable that, wow, people who can bring more to the table than you have can really allow you to step higher too, because they can do more with you. And just another one of the stories that I think is really informative for me in my career. And she never went to college, not one single day, but boy, she had a PhD on human intelligence. Like, she understood people's motivations, and I think that served me well to kind of get to know people, a little bit. And you and I've invested a lot of time kind of getting to know each other.
sure.
Maybe it's been 50-50 with us. Like, tell me about you and your life, what's going on with you. And then 50%, work stuff. Right.
Yeah.
But it works. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a valuable investment, and I didn't plan it that way, but that's kind of how we're rolling.
Yeah. Organically, it's, we're on 2 completely different sides of the country, and depending on who's where, we're on completely different sides of the planet, right? And we haven't really missed a beat, right? Like things, like we're not really looking at. I mean, we're always figuring out a communication, right? Because communication styles work until things get busy, right? So then you have to figure out. Then it becomes a level of, okay, I trust that Shane's taken care of or I send something to you. And we've done that. We have that communication where I think some people will appreciate this in the back and forth work environment. When you send an email, everything doesn't need a response. If I trust that I know you're reading it and you're doing what's your job, then I don't need a response to you telling me you got. I mean, if you and I responded back that we got every single email that we send back and forth to each other, well, Lord have mercy, we'd be,
Right.
That'd be all we were doing is responding back, right? So having that and developing that, I think is, I think it's key. Now, you and I are doing something very unique, and that most people don't have the type of setup that we're doing, or someone like myself helping them, like you do. So it's different, and we're both learning because it's also new to either one of us in some ways. So yeah, I agree that it's just, there is something about understand, like the trust is just, I mean, the trust, like that could probably be a book all in itself, just the like trust, like, you know, it's there.
Right. And it's interesting, you know, if you want to, we can sort of reverse engineer like what we're actually doing in this very minute is we are taking a risk, or we're taking a gamble, or we're experimenting that marketing my book via a podcast, okay, which is also marketing some of my ideas, which we've been laying seeds for the last, you know, few months. You know, we think that's a good investment versus booking signing parties at small bookstores, right? And that's how fast the world's changed, and the pandemic obviously shut the door on that as an option anyway. So we're like, okay, what forums can we express our ideas, get the word out there in a way that's going to build connectivity and understanding and followership, and that is this kind of forum, especially if people are watching and listening. But I think it could work on both frontiers. Now, it hasn't been proven out, but we think that there's pretty good evidence to suggest this is the right pathway. And so that's what, it's part of the fun of it too. You know, it's like we don't really know, and there's no metric. Like, remember you and I were talking about this, like, hey, can I see like what does success really look like? And you're like, well, you know, we'll kind of know, but there isn't a real formula to this kind of business because it's still emerging, right?
Well, yeah. So I mean, again, and it's one of those things it takes self-awareness, right? So having the self-awareness for you and I to understand what is an ROI on something, right? An ROI on something. Well, if I do this and these people say that it will get you X, right? Well, they've got 10,000 followers. Well, are they actually able to monetize those 10,000 followers? Where it is for you, it doesn't take but one follower to find something and only have 200, right? So it goes back to knowing what you are. And when you and I started this relationship, for those that aren't aware, I guess we've kind of hit it around. Like I represent Steve from an agent standpoint as well. And when you and I started this relationship, one of the things that I did mention was, you know, how open are you to just trying things, to throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks? Because you're not really going to know. I mean, who would have thought, let's be honest, who would have thought that a person speaking about the things that you're speaking about in the future of work in 2021 would be able to do videos to get 1 million views on TikTok?
Right.
It wasn't the first thing that came to my mind.
Right.
So, but by you willing to try these things and you willing to step out and do these things, you know, it again, because, and it goes back to what I said about having the humility and self-awareness to know about mistakes. Mistakes actually don't matter. You and I talked about it, and you had this great career migration. Like you were the first person to publicly put it out that we could find. And I said, look, make a bold statement, make a prediction, because people don't really pay attention to the losses, or when you make it's kind of like the weatherman, right? Everybody loves the weatherman. The weatherman stays employed for a long time, and he's right 20% of the time, right? It's no one, when you get it right is what matters, not how many times you were wrong.
Right.
And you know, that experimentation is, and willing to kind of evolve and have that. You did it with your book. You talked about this. You were writing the book, and then COVID hit. And it's like, oh, well, okay, I need to evolve a little bit. I need to innovate. And you did that.
Yeah, I think it's true. And this is another section of the book. We're talking about what is the most in-demand skill today. And this is highly, backed up by research from the best consultants, the best, researchers out there. Like, they know what the most important skill is. And it may feel unsatisfying to hear the answer to this one, but it's your learning velocity. High learning velocity and your adaptability are the most important skills that you can build today. And that's what I'm trying to help people see. Like, okay, those are just like the term that has driven me crazy is like, you need to be a lifelong learner. Well, what the heck does that mean? Like, that's not helping someone. Like, I've heard that forever. Like, what does that look like? And so I try to explain this to ways that people can understand in the book a little bit or relate to them a little bit more. Like learning velocity is, showing over the course of your life that you are curious, you have a growth mindset, you ask a lot of questions, and you always just want to know. And don't you want to be surrounding yourself with people that have that ability, because your business is going to change, your organization is going to need to change too. And the more people you have that are just fundamentally curious, and you cannot teach that. That is something that people have or they don't have. And so we need to evolve our ability to identify it and bring it out. And this is the most important skill people should be building. And here's another quote from the book that we'll be blasting out to the world when it ships in August, which is, I fundamentally believe, and this will be another one of those predictions that's going to go out there, that in the next few years, we're going to hire people more based on what they can learn than what they know. And everyone's going to be like, what? Yeah, we are going to hire people more based on what they can learn than what they can know, because we know the job's going to change. We know the business is going to change. So I got to know you can change. And so the more you can learn, the more valuable we're going to become. Back to what I said a few minutes ago, which is every unicorn out there today is not in the business they started out to be in. And that's just in a 20-year time horizon. All these businesses changed, right? LinkedIn, I was there. They were not by the time I got there, they were into recruiting. But the first 5 years, they weren't about recruiting. And then someone said, hey, you got all this network here. Yeah, that's what we're about. We're about, networking, connecting people. Well, I'd like to recruit in there. Is that okay? And they're like, well, I'm not sure. And they're like, well, I'll give you a bunch of money. And they're like, oh, really? Okay. Now we got a way to make money, right?
Yeah.
I love those stories are happening everywhere.
Well, it's like YouTube. YouTube was a dating site, and then now it's what YouTube is. Right now, it's a TV network in a lot of ways. Right. Wow.
And it's fascinating to me. The big news out of TikTok in the last, this being the Workquake After Hours, we can throw in a little bit of current news here. In the last few weeks, TikTok has gotten a lot of attention that, hey, this is a recruiting platform. And now I've been saying for years, the future of recruiting is going to be visual. You're going to make a short, like basically a movie preview about yourself that you're going to give to organizations. Say, this is it. This is my, preview of who I am. And people like that. We knew that at LinkedIn. People that had pictures got their profiles opened up way more than the people that didn't have pictures. So boom. And so I think now TikTok's saying, hey, we've got a lot. Yeah, it makes total sense to me, because I want to get more context on who you are. A web page, a static resume CV doesn't give me the 3D, 4D, 4K texture of who you are. And now we're seeing that. Now, are they going to run the tables? I don't know. We'll see. But there certainly seems to be companies lining up. There's 50. They did boom, just like that. And some leading companies like, yeah, we want to be where the eyeballs are and where the candidates are. And so, and that's what you got to do if you're recruiting today, is like, where are the people you want to hire? Where are they spending time? And it may sound like it's a low value add environment in TikTok. It's very, very, very deep with very interesting, talented people. Yeah,
absolutely. I think there's something, as of today, I think there was something like 500 jobs now listed on TikTok resumes, I think is what they're calling it. And I mean, really, man, it's my entrepreneurial brain is where it goes to hear you talk about this stuff. But it's creating an innovative culture within your business, whether it's, in leadership, whether it's how we hire, whether it's who the people we hire, it's whether it's how we, empower that now that you're here. Because I mean, let's be honest. Like, I can tell you from a marketing standpoint, there are still Fortune 500 companies that have never ran a Facebook ad. Okay. Mm-hmm. Why? Because the guys making the decision or the gals making the decision don't use Facebook. They think it's just for the kids. They're out of touch. They're out of touch. Well, can you imagine TikTok? Everybody my age and older, I'm 41. Most people think TikToks is just people dancing around to songs and, being silly, right? You just stated exactly what's happening. People that are sitting in the shoes you used to be in at LinkedIn are now going there and looking for talent, right?
Yeah.
And that's Amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw this, but on my LinkedIn mobile device a couple weeks ago, I got invited. Hey, do you want to make a 30-second video of yourself? I'm like,
Yes.
oh, okay. Now I saw this coming a long time ago. Of course, right? Now, what a lot of people on the podcast or listeners may not know is like, for you to support videos at scale is a pretty expensive endeavor because there's a lot of
Yes.
storage requirements that comes with that, and a lot of bandwidth requirements you need to have in your system. So the fact, it's not because they're not smart. Oh yeah, we don't care about video. They do care about video. They know video is key. But do you have the bones and the architecture and the money to support delivering that, right?
So that feature is so that new creator mode, once you get invited in, so it's kind of plays into what so once you're invited in to do LinkedIn Live, that's not open to everybody.
Oh, is that because I got LinkedIn Live accepted? Okay.
Yes. So now your account is considered a creator. So I got the same thing. I haven't done it yet.
Okay.
But it's there so people can go and learn about you before they engage. That's really what it is, and really what it's doing, and it kind of aligns with even what you're doing and you bringing me originally in, is personal brands matter, right? Personal brands, even for someone entering the workforce right now, personal brands matter more than ever, right? So let me ask, I have a great question I've never asked you.
Okay.
If you were hiring right now, because there's certain different regulations, right? Different states, you can't look at certain people's profiles on this, right? A little gray area would be a YouTube channel, YouTube videos, or even a podcast, right? Would it be on it like I'm curious to know, if you were sitting in those shoes at LinkedIn, would you be meeting with your hiring team and asking them to also search for these people? Hey, if you find a good candidate, search for them on Spotify and see if they've done any podcast interviews, or so we can learn as like you're doing recon, right? Like on what you're trying to do. Is that something you think you would do now in today's world if you were in those shoes?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We did it back then, Shane. I'll give you a great example. I don't think I talked about it in my book, but I've definitely talked about it in some talks I've given through the years. Years ago, we're building a new product. And one of the ways that we would test it was we would go out there and we would see developers would talk about it and they'd blog about it. Well, we saw this one guy who was a Google engineer in Boston, and we loved his feedback. And it wasn't great feedback. I mean, it wasn't positive feedback, but it was highly constructive. So we said, would you be willing to fly out here? We'll fly you out here. Would you be willing to come talk to us about your ideas? Because we love your ideas. And we could tell how deep he went in on the blogging about it. He was really into it. And we were monitoring that stuff. But it was mainly because we had, I can't remember the name. You probably remember the name of it, but there was a company, I think they've been acquired like 3 times, so I don't think their name even exists, but it's basically listening to the web whenever your company name came up or whenever your product name came up, and you would get fed wherever it came from.
Okay.
And so we invited him in, boom, roll the tape forward. A couple months later, he's working for us. And that wasn't a strategy. It was a product strategy to inform feedback. We found, it was guerrilla recruiting. There's another great story. And this is, we're talking 15 years old right now. I think it was Salesforce.
Okay.
And Salesforce wanted a bunch of salespeople. Well, what every company does, most companies do, is they have President's Club. And President's Club is usually a trip to Hawaii where you take your best salespeople. And Salesforce was looking at Chatter, seeing who was talking about President's Club. And they saw some really companies that they thought had great sales teams were in Hawaii at President's Club. They put 4 of their recruiters on a plane to that resort. Boom. They got about 4 hires out of it because they were just hanging out. They went, they saw the Chatter. It was unbelievable.
And that's why they're one of the top companies, both on innovation and to work for every year, because they're willing to step out of the box, and they've got somebody with a vision, or they empower people in positions with a vision. And that's what matters. And something that I now you live in Silicon Valley. Okay. I'm in the middle of America here in Kentucky. And I hope that people all around the world, no matter where you listen to, just like no matter who you are, we're Workquake. You can pick it up August 3rd, Amazon. But I hope what Steve just shared with you, this story of innovation, these stories of innovation that we shared on other episodes, I hope that you realize that this will work for you, even if you own the local bakery in town, even if you own a chain of McDonald's, even if you own a chain of movie theaters. This will help you thinking outside the box and willing to do things that you normally would look at and say that will never work, because it won't work if you don't give it a try. And it takes, and now I know, like I know, like a franchisee, I know you're stuck in a box and corporate says that's going to have to change too, right? All the things that you were told in your manual when you signed on for this fast food chain and said you had to hire and this is the framework, I guarantee you there's a lot of places where that's thrown out the window and they're just telling you do whatever you got to do, right?
Right. And Shane, let me add to this. If you are sitting in a business and you're frustrated because you can't hire people, you're frustrated because you think the millennial young workforce doesn't have the same level of integrity or loyalty or respect, you're looking at the problem the wrong way. This book reveals why those are somewhat trends. They're not the big trends. There is a whole new world that is taking the eyes of people who are looking for work right now. They're looking at something different. And if you're looking to sell yourself as the person that you want to them to marry for 30 years, that's not how people are looking at it now. And don't blame them. We created the world that they're seeing, right? They have more choice, more visibility, opportunity, and they're going to take advantage of that just like you would have 30, 40 years ago. And so that's who it's an interesting pivot, to sort of close the conversation here a little bit, which is, if you're sitting somewhere and you're frustrated, can't hold on to people, can't keep them, well, everyone's got that problem in every business in every industry right now. And it's not a millennial. It's not a Gen Z issue. It's not a short attention span, career sugar high, shopping for promotion. That is a small part of this new world.
Reality. It's reality.
That's right. And people are seeing unicorns pop out of nowhere. They're seeing 15 new verticals that were just made in the last few years, whether it's, share workspaces or electric cars or genetic testing to get family history. Like, there's so many different career paths. People are having a hard time figuring out what to do because there's more choices than ever before, and we created that world for them. Our generation created that world. So here's where it is. So we got to help come up with new ways of engaging the minds of people in different ways, and that's part of the exciting, crazy world that we're in. And I hope that this book is going to be helpful to help people shift their perspective. Like you said, it's like we got to look at this differently, because the way we've been looking at it's not going to help us get us there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I can speak from an entrepreneur stand. There's a lot of entrepreneurs in every community. And if you maybe are struggling, this is obviously a great place where I can plug Steve and say, hey, if you need to figure out some things you can do, reach out and, we'll get you Steve in-house. But even on a small scale, reach out to the local entrepreneur in the community. Maybe you can't afford to bring Steve in for a day. Reach out to the local entrepreneur and say, hey, I'll buy your dinner and I'll pay you a couple $100 to come in and let's sit down and let's just have a chat. I just want to, I want to give you my problems and tell me how you would fix them. And I know that sounds, well, they don't know my business. Listen, I don't need to know anything about what you do until I get there. And let me ask some questions and you just be transparent with me and we can dive in and we can figure it out. And I love it. And I think that is a way that truly, you got to think outside of the box. You got to think outside of the box.
Yep, absolutely.
Steve, this has been great, man. This has been great. I think we'll do another episode talking about a couple other pieces, but man, it's been awesome. It's been
looking forward to it, Shane. Thanks.
For those who maybe missed it, August 3rd, the book launches. You can go to Amazon. You can buy the audiobook, the Kindle version, or the physical copy. Go and buy 10, hand them out to your family members who are in the workforce, put a bow on it, put it under the Christmas tree later in the year. We will appreciate it. Steve will appreciate it, and they will appreciate it as well, because there's a lot of value in there. And I mean, this is one of those books you could probably price for like $500 and still get the value out of it, right? But we want to get it to the masses, so we obviously didn't do that. So, yeah, Steve, it's been a great episode, and look forward to diving into next week. And I know you've got an interesting next week or so ahead, but looking forward to catching up. So this is Shane Howard with the Workquake After Hours with
Steve Cadigan. Looking forward to seeing you next week.
Cheers.